Hello, everyone. My name is Ko Stipple, and this is a presentation I made on the TV show Firefly, created by Joss Whedon, titled Life on the Edge of Space. The TV show is a story of a crew of smugglers on the transport ship Serenity as they travel across space looking for jobs, some of them legal, some of them not. Along the way, they must evade Alliance forces as well as many other dangers found on the outer rim of space. The TV show was sequeled by the movie Serenity, made in 2005. So very interesting, and my favorite thing about Firefly is that it is a TV show that has both semantics and tropes containing sci-fi elements and also Western elements. So while it has typical elements of a sci-fi movie, like space travel, it's set in the far distant future, in a dystopian future, mind you. There's lots of futuristic gadgets and gizmos, like spaceships and also laser pistols. It also contains a lot of Western tropes as well, including cowboys, horses, settlers on the frontier, trains. Um, what Firefly is at its core is the story of how we will evolve in our future and as we move in towards space. It is the cultural representation of what humans might evolve into, as much as a technological one. A really good example from the societal perspective is that when humans pressed forth into space, after the Earth was used up, the two major powers at the time were the United States and China. So a lot of those cultural elements to both of those societies became the cultural norm. So you find a lot of characters that speak both English and Chinese. There's a reference to different Chinese currencies. A really fun thing is that most of the people do all of their swearing in Chinese. One of the overarching allegories for the TV show is that sin is essential to humanity, where our protagonists are considered bad people. They're smugglers, fugitives, outlaws, on the run from the law, while the bad guys in the show are the supposed unifiers of the galaxy. They are men in business suits, uniform, and typically they show little to no remorse for the common folk. Um, One of the main plot points in the show is when the Alliance tries to remove sin from a select group of people on a specific planet. What happens is when these people are removed of their sin through a chemical experimentation, they lose their humanity and they lose what it means to be human, and therefore they become a different species known as Reavers that will begin to terrify the galaxy. We'll go into those a little bit more later in the presentation. One of the metaphors of the show starts in the beginning when the captain of the spaceship, Malcolm Reynolds, he is a soldier fighting a failed rebellion against the Alliance. He loses at the Battle of Serenity, and when he loses the battle, he loses much of what it means to be himself. He loses parts of his personality, and these parts of his personality are then taken up by members of the crew. So it is his crew that makes him whole and gives him purpose. One of the ideologies of the show is that loss of innocence is the source of strength, where most of our most powerful characters usually have the least amount of innocence. They're pretty brutal and mean people, while the characters that are the most innocent and the most lovable are typically unable to fend for themselves or not the fighting type. And actually, something I want to touch on really fastly, this character is River Song, and she is the sliding scale of this ideology, where when she's at her most innocent, she's pretty much helpless, and she needs her brother or other members of the crew to take care of her. But when she loses her innocence in these fits of insanity, she becomes the all-powerful psychic weapon of the universe. The show does a fantastic job in its scale of representations of gender. I've always thought it was more of a sliding scale. Characters like Zoe on the feminine side is on one side of the scale, where she is the leader. In a sense, she is the first mate. She's a weapons expert. She's dangerous. She holds charge in her marriage and is the dominant figure in that. While on the other side, we have Kaylee, who is just a lovely, bubbly girl She usually laughs. She likes flowers. She wants to braid people's hair. She has a very emotional attachment with everyone in the crew. But she's also the ship's mechanic, a role that is typically a masculine one in our society. And despite not having any masculine traits, she excels at her job. She's typically the reason why the crew is able to escape from certain situations and is responsible for saving everyone's life. For the men, on one side of the scale is Jane, who is just the example of every toxic masculine trait that we can think of. He is greedy, he's lustful, he disrespects women, he is one that typically will betray anyone for his own better gain. But at the same time, we see lots of cracks of vulnerability in him. He develops a friendship with the preacher in search of some sort of moral rightness. He wears a silly hat that his mom knit him. He expresses a desire to be remembered fondly by the rest of his crew. And then Simon is the opposite of Jane. While he has none of the same masculine traits, and he's not a formidable opponent, he's not well versed in combat, he is well groomed, he is well dressed, he's smart, he's intelligent, he's a doctor, and he's also the most heroic member of the team. He has a deep appreciation of fondness for his sister, and his entire character revolves around protecting her and the rest of his loved ones. The idea of sexuality is very profound in Firefly, and Nara is a member of the Companions Guild, which is essentially a group of prostitutes that cover the galaxy. However, unlike in our society, there's not a negative stigma attached to them. The Companions are the most respected figure in most parts of society. Wherever the ship goes, Inara holds the most societal power among them. Because of this, the ship is actually able to go places where they typically weren't, purely because Inara is on board. They're trained from a very young age, but before the acts of intimacy are even mentioned, they train in psychology, fine arts, and martial arts for much of their training. Companions also choose their clients instead of vice versa. And there's two really interesting parts of this. For one, Inara often chooses both male and female clients, which makes bisexuality is more of a normal thing in the TV show. It's not really, there's not much attention is paid to it, which adds that idea of normalcy. Also, companions connect with their clients on a lot deeper level than just physical. They also connect emotionally and spiritually. So the ceremony is more of one where the clients find a love for themselves and they become in touch with their inner being. Inara is also one of two characters of a strong religious background. She is Buddhist and acts as a spiritual guide for her clients and also for most of the crew. And there's also a scene where Book, the shepherd, a preacher on the ship, comes to her seeking spiritual enlightenment. Representations of race. The crew's mostly white. However, 3 of the members of the crew are non-white, where Zoe is an African-American woman, and like we mentioned earlier, she is the second in command on the ship. She embodies the role of leadership on the ship, and also for the captain. Book is the shepherd or the preacher, and he acts as the moral compass for most of the show. While Inara, who we just talked about, has a Latin background. Earlier we mentioned Reavers, and we were talking about the Western tropes that are mentioned in the show. Reavers take the racial trope of the Apache out of the Westerns, where in the Westerns you would have savage Indians, or Indians depicted more so as savages, where the Reavers replace that and anyone can become a Reaver, so it removes that racial aspect. It makes the fear of Reavers relatable to everyone. There's a huge class division in the TV show where the inner planets have lots of wealth, security, supplies, and education, while the outer rim planets have next to none of those. Also, in the inner circle of planets, Reavers are not thought to be a real thing. They're often just a joke or a bedtime story that they tell to young children, where on the outer planets it is a constant fear, and anyone that goes and ventures out into space risks running into Reavers. There's an assumption that's made here by Firefly where that assumption is the world is divided into classes. Those at the top make the rules, and they make a statement that this is wrong and it is worth the fight to fix it. River Tam is a very interesting character. Her brother describes her not as gifted, but as a gift. So everything she did was perfect. She was a intelligent student, a good dancer, really good at philosophy and poetry. She's surgically enhanced when she goes to a Alliance-run academy. Instead of schooling her, they remove her amygdala, where she can no longer filter her emotions, and she becomes able to feel everything. So that includes the thoughts of and emotions of others, and she can sense danger and death. So this is just a short clip of River's abilities. This is near the end of the movie, where she seemingly makes a run to sacrifice herself to get these medical supplies in order to save the captain. She's surrounded by these Reavers who are just a feared presence throughout the galaxy. Any encounter of Reavers means death. Unless you are River Tam, and then it becomes a quite epic action montage. Much of River's story is the story of struggling with post-traumatic stress. So when she is at her most innocent, insane, there's also moments when she is at her least innocent and she has these bouts of insanity. And it's her coming to terms with what has happened to her and then her taking ownership of her situation and learning to live with it. Um, Firefly and Serenity have a very small but dedicated fan following. In fact, after the show was canceled, after it's just one season, a huge part of them being able to make a sequel was the fans' demand for it and the very high amount of sales in DVDs. So Firefly was canceled after one season, and then the fans 3 years later asked for that sequel, which came in the form of Serenity. And there's still other comics that could be explored, and fantastic Comic-Con outfits that come out every year. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. You have a wonderful day.